What's happening, everybody? Trey here, and today at Reactions to the Classics, I'm going to be reacting to the Smiths' final studio record, Strangeways, Here We Come. And man, this has been a long time in the making. I have full album reactions or reviews up to the first three Smith records, and now today I'm glad to be able to finish off the journey here. I want to shout out our longtime friend and patron and big Smiths fan of the channel, Evan David, for suggesting this one for us to properly look at and go over today. I'm looking forward to it, and if you know Evan David, man, the dude can write, and he has a great write-up of the band leading up to this point in their career. So looking forward to this one. Without further ado, man, let's get into these quick facts. Let's get into this write-up. Rock and roll legend has it that the creative nucleus of what would become the Smiths was first formed in May of '82 at the 23-year-old Stephen Patrick Morrissey's house in Stretford, Manchester, England, when the already locally infamous aspiring writer and singer had his first proper meeting with an 18-year-old guitar prodigy, Johnny Marr, the latter of whom had of late been seeking a songwriting partner with whom to form their own band. Having been impressed by the fact that Morrissey had already written a book of his own about one of their mutual favorite bands, the New York Dolls, Marr had been inspired to simply turn up and knock on at his already somewhat reclusive future partner's door after watching a TV documentary the previous night about the classic 1950s songwriting team of Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller, who the legendary partnership had been formed in the exact same way. This iconic meeting, later dubbed by Smith's biographer Tony Fletcher as, quote, one of the great initial encounters of modern music, would soon be followed up by subsequent meetings wherein their newfound friendship as well as their budding songwriting partnership both quickly began to bear fruit, much to Morrissey's relief, for, as himself would later put it in a typically melodramatic fashion, prior to meeting tomorrow, quote, I never had a social life or left the house. I just read and watched TV and done things considered to be soul-destroying. I'd write furiously. It was the thing that helped, but you have to have a grain of hope, which is a difficult thing to have. I was discovered, if you like, by Johnny, the guitarist, who just came and unearthed me one day and insisted we collaborate. I was there dying, and he rescued me. It's been very nice. We planned a strategy, and the Smiths emerged immediately. They were also roped in by Johnny, Andy Rourke on bass, and Mike Joyce on drums. They're the most capable musicians I came across in Manchester. It's a perfect little family. Me being literary and Johnny with his melodic ideas emerged together so successfully. I can't explain. It's really quite natural. We just follow nature, and there you have it. With Marr having thus recruited both his longtime friend Rourke as well as Joyce, the newly born Smiths, so named by Morrissey, who at this point had also decided he would be known only by his surname because, quote, it was the most ordinary name, and I thought it was time that the ordinary folk of the world showed their faces, had also acquired a manager of sorts in the shape of Marr's already established mentor figure, Joe Moss, and began making concert appearances around Manchester and venues such as the now iconic Hacienda, while also attempting to lure in record company interest from both prominent local independent label Factory Records as well as the giant London-based music conglomerate EMI, but to no avail. Instead, it was yet another independent label, the also London-based Rough Trade Records, who would eventually reap the bounty of signing the Smiths, with its founder Jeff Travis agreeing to release their first single, Hand in Glove, after hearing a demo cassette of their recordings. This groundbreaking single, which was packaged in the first of what would become the Smiths' signature iconic photo sleeve designs, did not make the mainstream UK Top 40 chart, but did reach number 3 on the UK Indie chart and began the process where the band would swiftly acquire a passionate cult following, fueled in part by increased exposure on the radio, courtesy of the John Peel Session Show, and in the music press such as NME and Sounds. Jeff Travis then swiftly moved to gain the Smith signatures on a full-blown record contract, or at least Morrissey and Marr signatures, for by accident or design, they were the only two band members who actually put pen to paper at this point, a fact which would later be the focus of much inter-band angst and bitter legal feuding in the years to come. At the time, however, signing with this particular label seemingly made a lot of sense for the Smiths, for as Rough Trade publicist Scott Peering put it, they, quote, mistrusted the music industry, so going with an independent meant they could call the shots. They like to control the pricing of their records and things like that. Their basic ethos was they wanted to be as big as the Beatles, but as anti-establishment as the Sex Pistols. Before all that could unfold, however, the Smiths had first embarked on a whirlwind rock and roll odyssey, which would then see them release 3 increasingly powerful studio records for Rough Trade between '84 and '86. course, that's the Smiths, Meet His Murder, and their masterpiece, The Queen Is Dead, all of which made either #2 or, even in the case of Meet His Murder, went to #1 in the UK, as well as a series of equally strong singles, several of which would also see them make eye-popping appearances on Top of the Pops, where the Smiths would swiftly be seen to stand apart from the mainstream UK pop scene of the era in several ways. Whereas early Smiths publicist Gil Smith would later explain, quote, "Most groups were manufactured, heavily styled, over makeup. The Smiths were three scallies from Manchester with a weirdo frontman who couldn't decide if he was Oscar Wilde, James Dean, or some hybrid. Among the sterile, bland electronics was something emotional. Indeed, the potent combination of Morrissey's on-stage flamboyance and delivering his ingeniously written lyrics, themselves chock full with scintillating, even Wildean-level wit, and Johnny Marr's comparatively understated but still powerful bird's-esque jangly guitar wizardry, would prove to be irresistible to many who heard and saw it both then and since, with their initial seismic impact perhaps being summed up by Oasis's Noel Gallagher, whose own musical future was initially inspired by seeing the Smiths perform This Charming Land on Top of the Pops in 1983, and who described their life-changing effect upon him as, quote, "They were it. They were as big and as important as the Jam and the Sex Pistols and the Beatles. When I first seen them on Top of the Pops, they were just so odd. Johnny Marr looked like this classic rock star, big red semi-acoustic guitar and turtleneck, and I was like, wow. Yet Morrissey just looked like something that had never been seen before, with the hearing aid and flowers hanging off his back pocket. They just kind of exploded, didn't they? Morrissey was going on about poetry and vegetarianism, and Johnny was doing things that were so simple on guitar, yet so difficult at the same time. That does your head in. Do you know what I mean? Like all the great bands, it's not something that you can sum up in one nifty sentence and say it's because of that. It's impossible. So people spend 30 years trying, and they'll probably take another 30 years. We'll still come back to the same thing. They were just effing great. As alluded to above, however, for all their era-defining success, the Smiths would nevertheless constantly be bedeviled throughout their entire career by several recurring problems, the first of which would be the double-edged nature of the publicity with their ever-outspoken frontman would regularly engender due to his endlessly eloquent, yet often controversial lyrics and statements, many of which would make him the target of furious media coverage both in the music press and the British tabloids, as he articulated his views on issues ranging from promoting vegetarianism and animal welfare to his oft-articulated hostility to both Margaret Thatcher's Tory government and even the royal family to boot. Other chronic cases which also plagued the band during this time included Andy Rourke's ongoing struggles with substance abuse, in particular heroin addiction, as well as a growing general sense of fatigue due to the band's increasingly hectic schedule. Whereas Marr himself noted, quote, "The Smiths were the Smiths all the time. Very rarely did we have any time off in that whole 5 years. We were always in the studio or touring. The audience were expecting the singles. When's the next one? What's the sleeve going to be like? What are the B-sides?" Because that was really important to us. It was like a relationship between us and the audience. This relationship would reach new heights of devotion during a particularly chaotic tour of the US in 1986, wherein the band's onstage presence was temporarily bolstered by the so-called Fifth Smith guitarist Craig Gannon, who had initially been hired to replace Rourke as bassist due to the latter's drug-related visa problems, but whose services were briefly retained even after said problems were resolved. Where the Smiths were often rapturously received by increasingly passionate crowds, echoing Rourke's belief that Morrissey's lyrics were universal. They talked about what nobody else in the music industry was expressing at those times. He said what everybody was feeling. The kids in America have to go to college. They're ripped away from their home. Sure, there are lonely people there and people who don't fit, and that was the main thing, that Morrissey's lyrics spoke to those lonely people, those misfits. Nevertheless, a lingering lack of organization surrounding this tour would increasingly sour the band's, and Morrissey's in particular, working relationship with both Rough Trade, whom they already had legal disputes with, and their US label Sire, whom Morrissey repeatedly accused of not doing enough to promote the band in the States. Of far greater significance, though, was the fact that the negative consequences of the chronic lack of a reliable management figure surrounding the band following the departure of Joe Moss from that position at the turn of 83 and 84 were beginning to cause the relationships within the band themselves and between Morrissey and Marr in particular to steadily deteriorate as time went on. Dealing with Morrissey in particular would prove to be particularly demanding, and an increasingly exasperated Marr was often left to fill the gap between his partner and what became a series of various short-lived management figures. Whereas Andy Rourke again put it, quote, "I think Morrissey's pretty much unmanageable. We'd have managers for a while. Initially they aimed to please, so they do whatever Morrissey asked. And what we asked or whatever. But after a few months, when they bedded in, they'd say, I think we should be doing this. And if Morrissey said, no, we're not doing that, if they didn't agree, they'd be fired. The resulting constant behind-the-scenes instability would thus eventually do much to doom the Smiths, even at what appeared to be the height of both their musical creativity and their potential future commercial success, with the band having by then agreed to sign a hefty, lucrative new record deal with their former suitor EMI, following the release of one legally obliged final album for Rough Trade, namely the album which is the subject of this review, which would soon be known as Strangeways, Here We Come, with its title referring to a notorious prison in Manchester which would infamously erupt into riots during the 90s, and whose sleeve would feature long-time Morrissey obsession James Dean's co-star in the East of Eden movie, one Richard Davalos, and which would eventually follow its predecessor by claiming number 2 spot in the UK upon its release in September of '87. By then, however, Johnny Marr had already become increasingly weary of having to cater to Morrissey's whims with regard to their management and other Smiths-related personnel, or as he himself later put, quote, "We had some really good people around us and they were dumped. That was the pattern that emerged, and it was invariably people who I was getting friendly with. So-and-so's, he's got to go. Will you phone him? So-and-so's got to go." I just got tired of it. It started to just come to me mind over a period of 18 months. Well, there is one solution. I mean, it was just something I didn't even think about. I thought, what's the solution? We did the last album, my favorite, but directly after making it, things got weird. The atmosphere was weird between us. I said, that's it. I fancy a 2-week holiday. I was just treated like a pariah. I thought with all the crap, managers coming and going like it was a revolving door, the weird atmosphere around the band, plus, musically, I was starting to want to do other things. I thought, now's the right time for it to finish, you know. I didn't know what I was going to do at all. No idea. But I thought, it's all right. Signing on is better than this. All this would be exasperated further by increasingly signs of growing differences between Morrissey and Marr to boot, with Morrissey's inflexible desire to cover an obscure tune by Cilla Black called Work is a 4-letter word, often being cited as the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back as far as Marr was concerned, while Morrissey had become increasingly annoyed at Marr for moonlighting with other artists. Marr would thus duly proclaim his wish to take a break from the rest of the band in June of '87 and wound up living in LA for some time. But what he might have regarded as a chance to take some much-needed rest was misinterpreted by the other Smiths as a more permanent situation. Ultimately, it was reading an anonymous article in the NME about the Smiths breaking up, which he erroneously attributed to Morrissey, who memorably insisted instead that, quote, "Whoever says the Smiths split shall be severely spanked by me with a wet Plimsoll," which would finally cause Marr to make the lie true. And by the time Strangeways Here We Come was finally released in September of '87, the split had indeed already become permanent. The other Smiths, led by Morrissey, would briefly make an abortive attempt to replace Marr with another guitar artist, one Ivor Perry, but to no avail. Morrissey would go on to have a successful solo career, albeit one often marred by controversy due to his political views in later years, while Marr went on to perform with several other bands over the years, including the Pretenders, and Modest Mouse, among others, while also carving out a successful career as a producer and session musician. Sadly, Rourke and Joyce would go on to sue Morrissey and Marr in the UK High Court in 1989 for what they regarded as a fair share of Smith's royalties, which had, until then, been split 40-40 between Morrissey and Marr, with non-songwriting members earning a further 10% each. Ultimately, while Rourke would soon settle out of court for a sum of £83,000 on top of his existing 10%, Joyce continued the action, with the court eventually finding in his favor in '96 and awarding him back damages of $1 million and a 25% share of the Smiths' royalties in the future. Thus, the often unwritten, imprecise nature of the Smiths' business dealings from first signing to Rough Trade onwards finally came back to haunt them with a vengeance, and much to Morrissey's chagrin in particular, with his disgusted outrage at the court's findings being amply expressed in his autobiography and elsewhere. Indeed, 8 months after the judgment, Morrissey would claim that, quote, "The court case was potted history of the life of the Smiths. Mike talking constantly and saying nothing, Andy unable to remember his own name, Johnny trying to please everyone and constantly pleasing no one, and Morrissey under the scorching spotlight in the dock being drilled. How dare you have been successful? How dare you move on? To me, the Smiths were a beautiful thing, and Johnny left it, and Mike destroyed it. Morrissey just leaving it all out there, man. Ironically, for all the acrimony which would thus soon surround the band's final days and beyond, the recording of the Strangeways album itself had been a pretty harmonious affair for the most part, by all accounts, taking place as it did in the relaxed atmosphere of the Wool Hall residential studios in Somerset, England, whereby the instrument-playing members of the band would take full advantage of the well-stocked nature of the wine cellars therein, playing Spinal Tap tunes of all things long into the night after Morrissey had gone to bed. Perhaps unsurprisingly, given these fond memories of the recording process, the resulting album has since been cited by all four members as their favorite. Interesting. Although Andy Rourke, for one, would later sound a note of caution by saying that, quote, Strangeways sounds really accomplished, but if you look at it another way, all the naivety is gone out of it. Playing-wise, it sort of loses its edge, but it makes up for it in other ways. It's not got that flying by the seat of your pants vibe we were perhaps had before. The aforementioned Tony Fletcher, meanwhile, would argue that the individual Smiths' eternal insistence that it was their finest work has occasionally seemed like a retroactive defense against obvious inclinations to hear it as the work of a band on the brink of breaking up. But that decision had not yet been made when Morrissey told Melody Maker in the summer of '87 that, quote, Strangeways perfects every lyrical and musical notion the Smiths have ever had. It's far and away the best record we've ever made. Sonically, at least, he was not wrong. The progression and production values was emphatic. The band had every right to feel proud of themselves. Ultimately, the most sincere way to praise Strangeways' Here We Come was to acknowledge it as a transitional album. It was the sound of a group escaping the formula that had made it successful, displaying occasional flashes of brilliance and inspiration on its way to an undetermined future destination. The next Smiths album would have placed Strangeways in full and proper context, but of course, that never arrived. Evan David notes, for my own money, having first become enamored of the Smiths' music during the late 90s university days after hearing their masterpiece single Panic playing at my far cooler best friend's house in Bath, England, I would perhaps echo the judgment of yet another rock critic, John Robb, who argues in turn that, quote, I don't think Strangeways is quite as good as The Queen is Dead, but this is splitting hairs here. It's still a really great album. It's 95% instead of 100%. It's a classic album, but not quite the classic the one before was. I mean, how could you top the album with my favorite Smiths track, of course, Symmetry Gates? Still, I've long wanted to know what Trey would make of this one once he eventually got around to finishing his series on the Smiths studio albums, and given that November is his birthday month, after all, shout out to all the November babies out there like myself, it seemed that the right time had finally come to put this piece of RTCC unfinished business to bed at last. Just ignore the title of track 7. Pure coincidence, I assure you. All right, man. Well, thanks again to Evan David. That was a wonderful primer, I think, and a summation of the group. With all that said, I'm ready to dive into this record and check out what we got. 10 tracks. I'm going to have the lyrics pulled up to all these songs. As always, due to copyright, the music might not be in here, but there will be a Vimeo link in the description for you to check out, which has the full album uncut. And shout out to the patrons who allow us to have the server space on there. But with all that said, man, let's get into this thing. I'm looking forward to it. And it seems we're starting with a very Smiths-esque title here. We got a rush and a push, and the land is ours. The title was inspired by a poem by 19th century Irish nationalist campaigner Lady Jane Francesca Wilde. This song is perhaps most significant in the extent to which it demonstrates Johnny Marr's evident desire to explore new musical boundaries at this point in his career. For as Marr later explained himself, quote, I really wanted to open the album. However, I was going to do it with a song with no guitar parts on it as a challenge, and also I was kind of very bored of the whole jingle jangle thing. It seemed like we were becoming put into that box, so I thought I'd try and sneak the first track onto the album and see if anyone noticed. Nobody noticed until I told everybody. Coupled with Morrissey's abstract yet strangely optimistic lyrics, this tune would both signal a new departure for the band, literally, given that they were meant to be their imminent move to EMI, and show that Morrissey and Marr had indeed reached new heights as songwriters, with the latter again insisting that musically, as a 23-year-old, I didn't want to be repeating myself. To somebody who'd lived and breathed music since the age of 11 to a freakish, insane degree, repeating myself was like death. With all that said, man, I got the lyrics pulled up. Let's get into Strangeways. Here we come. All right, a rush and a push, and the land is ours, man. But starting off on a great note. Still, it's great just diving back into that Smith brilliance after you haven't been there in a while, man. And it's cool that even though obviously there's no guitars in this, it was very keyboard dominant. You even had Mar on a marimba right here. It gave some unique, different textures to the band. It still had that core Smith sound to it, and as you'd expect, Morrissey's lyrics are fantastic, and kind of continue the themes that we've had in the Smiths' work in the previous years here. Just starting off, they said there's too much caffeine in your bloodstream and a lack of real spice in your life. I think that first lyric kind of sets the stage for our protagonist in here, who is a bit seemingly lost in the ether, so to speak, here, looking for that spark of life to kind of bring him back, whether that be in a person, which it seems is what he kind of turns toward, a lover at the end, or something else. And then we got that refrain, oh, but don't mention love, I'd hate the strain of the pain again. I'm kind of getting the vibe where this guy's heart has been broken before, and it's like, I don't want to deal with giving myself up to somebody and kind of being vulnerable and loving someone else, because then they might leave me again, and then that pain is going to be unbearable, so to speak. And then we kind of Morrissey does a good job shifting the chorus as well, where he says a rush and a push, and the land that we stand on is ours. It has been before, so it shall be again. So almost a bit hopeful in that. And he says, and the people who are uglier than you and I, they take what they need and just leave. And then later he changes that, the people who are weaker than you and I, they take what they want from life. And then at the end he says, your youth may be gone, but you're still a good man, so phone me. Kind of sounds like he said something else in there, a little bit more explicit right there, to really maybe just be like, man, I really want you, really want this love type of thing. And he finishes saying, I think I'm in love. So maybe that love cycle is starting again. But all that to say, lovely way to start off the record, man. It's getting me fired up for what else we got coming up. And our second track now, I started something I couldn't finish. Returning to a more archetypally a Smiths-like sound than the previous song, this glam rock inspired tune would allegedly be the focus of several behind-the-scenes disagreements during its creation, both between Marr and his fellow instrumentalists, Rourke and Joyce. According to Marr himself, it was, quote, the first time that I was aware of doing something that they didn't like. And between Marr and Morrissey, the latter of whom, according to album producer Stephen Street, made several complaints about various bits of the tune when Street played an early copy of it to him on cassette, much to Marr's annoyance. As Andy Rourke later put it, quote, we were probably working on that for a couple of days. If Morrissey didn't like it, he should have been there with us listening to it at the time, not sat in another room watching telly waiting to say, I don't like that. It's just wasting everyone's time, isn't it? A shame, really. As for my money, this is a quirky, fun little tune whose peculiarly lively nature would ultimately belie its troubled birth to reach number 23 in the UK charts upon its release as a single. Also, be sure to keep an ear out for a Doubting Morrissey's recorded comment to Street at the end of the track of, okay, Stephen, shall we do that again? A comment which sums up the oddly unsure of itself nature of the whole tune as eloquently as anything else could. All right, I started something I couldn't finish here. Man, I enjoyed that one. Yet again, kind of bringing back, obviously, the guitar, but we had a bit of a saxophone buried in the mix as well, which is, yet again, showing the Smiths expanding their sonic palette here a little bit. And, man, Mike Joyce, I thought, killed it on the drums, man. A powerful performance there. And, I think the lyrics are pretty self-explanatory about this person who has started this relationship. He, quote, it says, I forced you to his own and you were clearly never meant to go. Typical me. I started something and now I'm not too sure. So obviously he started in this relationship and now he's not too sure if he should have started it, I think, even in the first place. And it obviously, as we dive into the lyrics, we know that he doesn't want to be in this anymore. He kind of compares it. What did he say here? Now 18 months hard labor seems fair enough. So this guy, either he doesn't like confrontation or maybe he likes the physical benefits this relationship comes in, but deep in his heart, man, the love is not there. And so kind of maybe could see parallels between the group themselves and this. All in all, man, another strong tune right here. Maybe not up to par with our opener, but still an enjoyable jam to be sure. Liked what the Smiths are doing musically in these first two tracks, and now we're going to Death of a Disco Dancer, going about 5.5 minutes here, one of the longer ones. And Evan David notes this is partially inspired by Dear Prudence, of course, from the Beatles' White Album. This hypnotically compelling tune would not only see Mike Joyce put in one of his most powerful drumming performances on the drums of his Smith career, but would also see none other than Morrissey make his impromptu instrumental debut on it as a pianist to boot. More than anything, however, it is perhaps Johnny Marr's inspired usage of a drone-like emulator synthesizer coupled with Morrissey's aggressive, cynical lyrics that really sets this tune apart, with Marr himself insisting that, quote, "For me, that emulator thing, that drone, it really captures the band. It's almost like Goldfinger on Bad Acid," which is kind of the Smiths in a nutshell. All right, Death of a Disco Dancer, man, a lot going on here in this one. Obviously, as we heard in that 2-minute coda there, where we just had the instrumental where Morrissey's piano playing, which is cool knowing that this is the only Smith's track that he played an instrument on, mixed with that kind of droning keyboard. That was an interesting blend. Obviously, Joyce was bringing the heat and power on the kit as well. I like the idea in the chorus. I think it's one a lot of people can relate to, wanting love, peace, and harmony. Very nice, but maybe in the next world. I think most people would agree they want love and peace and harmony in the world, but actually wanting it and grabbing it and going out and making it happen in the world. Those are two very different things, and obviously it takes a lot of effort to achieve that love, peace, and harmony. And I think Morrissey is rightly kind of drawing up the conclusion that most people are like, we'll try it in the next world, so to speak. I was also reading here that this might have been partially inspired by a 1982 bombing that had happened at the Dropping Well Disco. Whether that's true or not, who knows, but maybe gives a little insight to the name of this track itself here. He notes, and if you think peace is a common goal, that goes to show how little you know the death of a disco dancer. Well, I'd rather not get involved. I never talk to my neighbor. I'd rather not get involved. Yet again, that couples quite well with the kind of cynical nature of the chorus in here. So all in all, man, another unique track, I think, in the Smiths canon, not only for Morrissey jumping on and playing, but just, the guitar parts at the very start were a bit kind of scratchy and whatnot, and I thought the progression of the tune was impressive. And now we're going to go to a short and sweet jam, only 2 minutes long. We have Girlfriend in a Coma. Evan David notes here, with this gloriously incongruous combination of an irresistibly bouncy, jaunty, even joyful tune, which is partially inspired by Bob and Marcia's reggae tune Young, Gifted, and Black, coupled with lyrics that could have been taken straight out of the early 60s death disc genre of tragic teenage tunesmiths such as Ricky Valens and the Shangri-Las. Simon Goddard would later aptly describe the curious effect of Girlfriend in a Coma as follows, quote, "The emotional gauntlet of life, hope, guilt, regret, and death rattles past the listener in just 2 minutes, 2 seconds flat." While even Morrissey himself would admit that, quote, "You're not really supposed to like those songs. They're very depressing and not supposed to be played on the radio." Certainly, some of the creative circumstances surrounding the song itself would be depressing enough in their own right, as not only was the prospect of recording its notorious B-side, the aforementioned Cilla Black cover, work as a four-letter word, allegedly the proverbial straw which broke the back of Johnny Marr's patience with Morrissey's increasing musical inflexibility. But again, as Simon Goddard put it, quote, "Wretchedly, Girlfriend in a Coma was released in the aftermath of press reports confirming Marr's acrimonious exit from the Smiths. Although the Smiths had yet to officially call it a day, its deathly subject matter seemed to symbolically scrawl their looming termination on the wall for all to read. Despite all that, however, I, for one, would argue that this tune, perhaps my favorite on the whole album, remains as a testament to all the weirdly beguiling power both of Morrissey's lyrics and of the Smiths as a whole. For in 1987, surely only they could have gotten away with not only releasing such an odd tune as a single, where it would reach no less than number 13 in the UK charts, but with accompanying it with an official video to boot, where it shows Morrissey sarcastically crooning over footage taken from 1964's homoerotic British kitchen sink movie drama, The Leather Boys. Well, with all that said, man, I'm looking forward to this short and sweet tune. All right, Girlfriend in a Coma, man, short, sweet, to the point, made the most use of its time, though. I think musically the melody was just gorgeous in here, man. I really was drawn to how beautiful it was, which obviously contrasts with the serious subject matter with this girlfriend literally in a coma here. And we have some of those Morrissey-isms, if you will, where he says there were times when I could have murdered her, but I would hate anything to happen to her. No, I don't want to see her. But then he progresses in the next. He notes that there were times I could have strangled her. Would you please let me see her? So I think as the song goes on, he recognizes more and more, oh man, this is getting serious. And as we saw in the video, there were, Morrissey just looking up like that and kind of crossfading over that show, man. It made for an interesting visual as well. And at the end, he knows, let me whisper my last goodbyes. I know it's serious. So obviously, the coma is not looking good for this girlfriend here, and he's gonna have to bid her adieu. One, like Morrissey kind of said, it's one of those depressing tunes that it just sounds so pleasing, and just you kind of gravitate to the music in it. That sometimes I think people just kind of gloss over the actual morbid lyrical content. But all that to say, man, really nice tune there. Had to give it the heart treatment on Spotify. And now we're going up to the next track in here. Stop me if you think you've heard this one before. And this one, 3.5 minutes later, described by Morrissey himself as representing the sound of the Smiths at their height. Morrissey was understandably aggrieved that when this tune's planned single release in the UK in October of '87 was kiboshed due to its being banned from daytime airplay on BBC Radio 1, citing fears that people would connect its lyrical reference to planning mass murder to the real-life massacre that was carried out in a small village of Hungerford in Berkshire, England, a few months before, when a gunman killed 16 people, including his own mother, and wounded 15 others. An exasperated Morrissey would later insist that, quote, I desperately wanted that to be released, but Radio 1 said they would never under any circumstances play it because of the line about mass murder. They said people would instantly link it with Hungerford, and it would have caused thousands of shoppers to go out, buy machine guns, and murder their grandparents. Again, all this is something of a shame to say the least, as this cracking tune does indeed showcase the Smiths at their iconic best, with Morrissey's sardonically jaded depiction of a love affair in inexorable decline is coupled with some excellent jangly guitar work by Johnny Marr, with the echoey intro in particular apparently achieved by the latter dropping kitchen cutlery of all things upon his open guitar strings. It was moreover released as a single in other areas of the world with mixed chart results, and accompanied in those areas with an official video, which we will also look at. Interestingly, the same video was used in the UK to promote the song's replacement as an official single, namely I Started Something I Couldn't Finish. So you be the judge, people. We'll kind of look here and see which one of these we think fits which song more. Let's get it. All right, stop me if you think you've heard this one before, man. Starting off with the video, I thought it was a pretty creative video. We obviously had Morrissey there in his Smiths shirt, surrounded by a legion of Smiths fans who, if you would conjure up in your mind what Smiths fans would look like at this period, that kind of looks like the people in this video. So I think they did a good job. They were all on the bikes, man, going all around. You had shots of like a little girl with like a shopping cart and a trash bag, just kind of getting the streets wherever they were filming it. I thought it was pretty tight, man, and I think it fit the song's subject matter. I'd have to listen to it as well with I Started Something That I Couldn't Finish over it to see which one I like more. But I would think that it worked, man. It worked for what it was, and musically and for the song itself, yet again, had a very strong melody, strong guitar work by Marr. I like he was able to have a little mini solo of sorts at the very end of the tune. Very pretty, kind of got a little bit more into that jangly sound that we haven't had as much on the record up to this point. I like when they, expand to different sounds, but still whenever they go back to what is tried and true, you always love it as well. So Marr is a big highlight for me on this, and Morrissey really kind of gets to the heart of things here. A lot of falling out of love, it seems, on this record, where he says, stop me if you think that you've heard this one before. Nothing's changed. I still love you. Oh, I still love you. Only slightly less than I used to. my love. But it's like, hey, at least he's still calling her his love, right? I want you guys to try that out and see how that works out for you, and just say, hey, man, I was just quoting Morrissey. Honestly. So another enjoyable track on this one, man, and I can see why Morrissey wanted it to be released as a single. It kind of seems like it has that single DNA in it, if you will. So we're going to keep this going now to the only song on this that I'm familiar with. One of my favorite Smiths tracks, Last Night I Dreamt That Somebody Loved Me. We did a Smiths top 10 songs for one of our patrons, my dad and I did last year, so this made it, and I think rightly so. Evan David notes, as far as many Smiths fans and critics are concerned, this truly epic tune, which reached number 30 on the UK singles chart in December of '87, still stands as their magnum opus, not only of this record, but of their entire career, and it's certainly a contender as far as I'm concerned, with Morrissey's harrowingly bleak, despairing lyrics about how it feels to be forever denied the love that you can only feel in your dreams, being accompanied by some uniquely compelling instrumentation from his fellow Smiths, with Johnny Marr himself recalling its genesis as follows, quote, some writing moments you do remember really specifically, and that was one. We were coming down from Carlisle. I sat on the tour bus with my guitar unplugged. I had come up with this figure. I was absolutely ecstatic about it, but I couldn't work out how my fingers were playing it. So I was holding my breath in case I lost it. The song has drama, poetry, and an almost gothic intensity. The emotions it gives off and that went into writing it pretty much personified what it was like being in the Smiths. It comes from the heart of all of us without having any influences or agenda. It's an outpouring, like a little movie. It's beyond four people playing rock and roll, which sounds grandiose, but I do feel that it has certain classicism to it. Simon Goddard memorably put it, quote, the last great Smiths blockbuster, which would later be named by Morrissey as his favorite Smiths track, an opinion shared by David Bowie, of all people. Strangeways' emotionally raw, soul-bearing center reads like the final act of a tragedy of the heir of nothing in particular, now older, world-weary, and rapidly losing the fight, staggering into the wings to an overwhelmingly orchestral requiem. If Beethoven had been a lyricist as well as a composer, then his piano, Moonlight Sonata, would surely have sounded like this. All right, Last Night I Dreamt That Somebody Loved Me, just as good as I remembered it, man. Unique in the fact that it does have that 2-minute introduction. We have that kind of sound in the background as well, throwing us back to almost the Meat is Murder title track, and the keys obviously kind of building that anticipation before boom, everything drops. We're in it. I think the orchestral arrangement just gives that sense of melancholy that is just dripping in this tune. Morrissey's lyrics are on fire, some of his best, in my opinion. Really gets to the heart of that longing for love, that loneliness, alienation that I think gravitates a lot of people to this song when they're out of love and maybe want to be in it. I mean, I just think the opening lines, last night I dreamt that somebody loved me, no hope, no harm, just another false alarm. And then he questions, how long before the last one, and tell me how long before the right one. The story's old, I know, but it goes on. I mean, there are not a lot of actual lyrics in here, but they are just constructed in such a way that I think make it one of the more powerful Smiths tunes and one of their best. So I think this one deserves all the praise that gets heaped on it. And now we're gonna go to Unhappy Birthday here, ladies and gentlemen. Evan David notes, while I must stress again that this offbeat tune's wicked title should not be taken literally as a reflection of my own wishes for Trey's own impending birthday. What is true is that whereas its bitter yet absurd lyrics may strangely provide some cynical light relief after the heavy-going vibes of the previous tune, the comparatively light-hearted instrumental backing is regarded by Johnny Marr as one of his personal favorites, not only of this album, but of the Smiths' entire career, with the guitarist insisting that, quote, what's going on between the bass and the guitar is one of the things that I still hold up as being unique and that no one else has ever quite done. There was absolute synchronicity between Andy and myself a lot of the time because we were best mates. That ultimately is one of the sadder elements of things going down the way they did. Too many things were getting in the way of me and him being able to take care of each other properly. All right, Unhappy Birthday, man. Yet again, bringing the heat right here. I quite enjoyed this one, though a little bit more kind of tongue-in-cheek, I think, in, the way it's framing such harsh, words that this man is speaking from. Yet again, having his heart broken in the Unhappy Birthday. I thought that coupled with the music, yet again, Marr, man, one of my favorite guitarists, and a song like this is a reason. There's no wild solo in here or crazy effects. It's just him being able to knock out a very catchy melody in here that works well with the lyricism. And I like the lyrics. It just starts, "I've come to wish you an unhappy birthday because you're evil and you lie. And if you should die, I may feel slightly sad." Is this the same girl from Girlfriend in a Coma? We may never know. But then he says other people tell him, when usually it's nothing, surely you're happy, it should be this way. In that sense, like, hey, when usually you're not in love, isn't it better to feel this way, and at least you were loved at one point in time, even though you are now broken up and heartbroken. And then he kind of goes to extremes and says, "I'm going to kill my dog," and then we repeat the chorus again, and then he says, gets real serious, and then I said no, and then I shot myself. So drink, 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 and be ill tonight. So here he's just wishing doom and gloom on everybody, even himself here, and is kind of sulking in the fact that he is the one that is left behind. So another enjoyable jam right there, and we got 3 songs left, y'all, and now we're going up to Paint a Vulgar Picture, following up the bitterness of the previous tune and kicking it up to 11, if not 13. Morrissey's unbridled contempt here for an unscrupulous record business's cannibalistic practices when faced with a recorded musical legacy of a newly dead rock star has often been taken as an attack on the Smiths' soon-to-be former label Rough Trade and its boss, Jeff Travis, in particular, although Morrissey himself would deny this, claiming that, quote, "It wasn't about Rough Trade at all. I was a bit confused when Jeff Travis despised it and stamped on it. It was about the music industry in general, about practically anybody who's died and left behind that fanatical legacy which sends people scrambling, like Billy Fury or Mark Bolan. Yet, while the record industry in question is indeed duly castigated without mercy in this ever-scathing tune, the Dead Star, him or herself, does not get off scot-free. As for all the tender awkwardness that comes from a fan's eye view of their deceased idol, perhaps inspired by young Morrissey's own memories of awkward backstage encounters with members of the New York Dolls, there remains the perhaps slightly hypocritical, given Morrissey's own ongoing recurring record music industry woes, not to mention the future fate of the Smiths' own back catalog, but still poignant moment where it is pointed out that, quote, "This was your life, but you could have said no." All right, Paint a Vulgar Picture, man. Another one I'm going to have to heart. I thought that this was a really well done piece of songwriting by Morrissey here. The shift in perspectives I thought was impressive. And, that tone that Johnny Marr was able to get on his guitar is just yet again another testament to how great a instrumentalist that he is. I thought it had a bit of a relaxing kind of guitar sound to it. And, that fit with in contrast to the serious nature of this tune, man. We start off noting that we're kind of like a fly in the wall at the record company meeting. The star has now died, and then the greed starts to show off. They say, "Oh, I knew him first," this or that, and then they get into talking about reissuing, repackaging, reevaluate all the songs. Kind of makes you think of some of the releases from artists that have passed, in the past decade here, how the States just will, try to pump out any type of reissue or repackage that they can. And then we kind of get into that idea, oh, you could have said no in this life, to this life if you wanted to. We name drop the BPI, MTV, and BBC. Please them, please them. And then we shift to this fan that was really enamored with the dead artist, noting that they touched this person at soundcheck. You had no real way of knowing. In my heart, I beg, take me with you. I don't care where you're going. But to you, I was faceless. It's one of those ideas where, you meet somebody that really is famous or makes an impact on you. They might forget you, in a couple hours, but you might remember that meeting for the, decades or the rest of your life, depending on how important this person was to you. And you kind of get that sense of this fan right here. And so that continues to go around. And then we figure out that this fan actually worked under this artist. They were at soundcheck with them. You're just the same as I am. What makes most people feel happy leads us headlong into harm. I thought that was a great couplet right there. Makes you think, and notes that this person and their true love, the dead artist, are never going to meet again. Just something to ponder, and I think I've never really heard this subject of the music industry tackled in such a way, and I think Morrissey kind of dissected it from all the different avenues that you might see it from, the record executives to fans to just the artists themselves. So We only have 2 songs left, y'all. We got another short and sweet tune, Death at One's Elbow. Evan David notes, it's a 2-minute slice of Smith's rockabilly. This tune often tends to be regarded as a little more than filler, yet as so-called filler goes, it's still a lot of kooky fun, even with Johnny Marr himself insisting that it was almost like we had a right to be slight right now, to be less intense. I like the beat, I like Morrissey singing, and I like my own weird backing vocal. All right, Death at One's Elbow, man. This was short, sweet, to the point. Definitely one of the weaker tracks on here, but not bad in my opinion in any means. I liked almost we had a bit of harmonica thrown in there a little bit. Kind of gave a different type of sound texture. Almost a bit of a country flair at points to this one with the beat in it as well. It had almost like a drum machine at the start too, which was a bit unique. And Morrissey here telling Glenn, who apparently, I'm just gonna guess off first listen, is the boyfriend to this girl in here that Morrissey's really hung up on. He tells Glenn, stay home tonight, or because there's somebody here who'll take a hatchet to your ear. Morrissey's essentially laying down the warning here that you better not come home, Glenn, essentially. But then at the end, he notes, oh, don't you come to the house tonight because you'll slip on the trail of all my sad remains. What a graphic description of just sadness and heartbreak right there, man. And then he ends yet again saying, goodbye, my love. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are up to the final tune, I Won't Share You here, often regarded as Morrissey's jealously possessive warning plea to his soon-to-be former partner Johnny Marr, and even treated as Exhibit A by many of those seeking post-mortem musical clues as to why the Smiths split up. The fact remains that this is still a cracking little tune in its own right, full of frankly beautiful instrumentation to go with its poignantly plaintive lyrics, regardless of its alleged historical baggage, with Johnny Marr himself insisting that, quote, I just heard a really lovely tune first off. I was happy that we had another unusual little star in our galaxy or whatever. The lyrics were brought to my attention by somebody even before we got out of the studio. There were raised eyebrows, and what do you think of that then? But it was all in a day's work for me, really. Still is. If I was bothered about it, I'd say, well, I ain't anyone's to effing share me. But that's really the truth. If, in fact, that sentiment was directed towards me, then quite rightly, I feel quite good about it. It's nice. It's okay. I am not arsed about it. Well, after this, y'all, we will get into Evan David's favorites, my favorites, and then my overall thoughts and score of Strangeways. Here we come. All right, I won't share you another one. Gotta add the hard treatment too, man. A fitting way to end this record, and I think the Smiths' proper canon, if you will. The guitar work was fantastic. Almost sounded ukulele-like, just with how how kind of pitched it was, and I don't know the ins and outs, man. How Johnny Marr gets his sound, but all that to say, I thought it was a lovely backdrop to this. A bit more of an overall relaxing tune, a pretty tune with Morrissey's vocals. I thought he sounded great on this one, and I can see how people would have read this as being about Johnny Marr, but I think in general you can just apply it to breakup of a relationship or whatever the case may be. I won't share you. I won't share you with the drive and ambition, the zeal I feel. This is my time. And then he notes about a note that he wrote to her. She read it, and she says the Perrier is gone, went straight to my head, or is life sick and cruel instead? So again, we get some of that more cynical type of a viewpoint in this as well. And he notes life tends to come and go. That's okay as long as you know that life tends to come and go. In our final line, I think is fitting, just the Smiths owe to us too, that I won't share you, I won't share you, I'll see you somewhere, I'll see you sometime, darling. And then that's it. I think that's a great lyric to end off this record, and like I said, just the Smiths canon in proper. Another very enjoyable jam right here, and I was impressed with how they were able to kind of bring this all together. And that'll now bring us to, ladies and gentlemen, favorite tracks. I'm going to start with Evan David's. He notes that Girlfriend in a Coma and Paint a Vulgar Picture are first and second, with I Won't Share You, the song we just listened to, and Last Night I Dreamt That Somebody Loved Me coming in joint third. I'm going to be going with Last Night I Dreamt That Somebody Loved Me. I always have just been gravitated to that one. And I'm also going to give some love two, just kind of going from top to bottom, a rush and a push, and The Land Is Ours. What a lovely way to start the record off. I also got to give some love to Girlfriend and a Coma. Just the subject matter you can't help but be drawn to. Stop Me If You Think You've Heard This One Before, and Unhappy Birthday I'm also going to give some love to, as well as Paint a Vulgar Picture. I thought that talking of the music industry was great, and even I Won't Share You, man. I had a lot of favorites on this one, and that'll seamlessly take us to my overall thoughts and score of this record, man. Smiths, yet again, got a hit here. Do not have a bad record. I know they only have 4, so it's a little easier to have no misses, but I think Strangeways, Here We Come is not a miss. It's a great record here, especially on first listen. I'm looking forward to diving into it some more throughout the rest of this week. Only 10 songs, 36 minutes. It's an easy listen, a quick length. So it shows the group kind of expanding and maturing a bit in their sonic sound a bit, yet still we had those jams that kind of kept some of those jangly pop roots that we had all the way back in, the OG Smiths self-titled release. So, seeing them take the best of the old and pushing forth a new sound for them was really, really impressive. I thought some of Morrissey's best actual lyrics are on this as well. The weaving of different perspectives, especially his thoughts on love and heartbreak and dealing with that were quite impressive, while still kind of bringing a touch of humor to some of these darker tunes as well. So all that to say, man, I'm feeling a nice 825/85 for me on this. I do really love the Smiths, and this just confirms that they are one of my favorite bands, man. Not only of the 80s, but I think in general. I think if you're certain types of people are gravitated to the Smiths music, and I guess I fall into that subset right there. So really enjoyable record. Again, I want to thank Evan David for the wonderful write-ups for the band proper and also these songs. Be sure to give him some love in the comments below, as well as let me know what you think of this record. Where would you rank it in their discography? Maybe I'll come out with a discography ranking video for them. If you'd be interested in that, let me know. And also let me know your just favorite tracks off of this. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can check out our Patreon page, link below, and will also be at the end screen, along with another video you might enjoy. But until next time, y'all, thank you so much for watching. Long live the Smiths. And until next time, I will see you.